The night sky above Kandahar was a stitched canvas of tracer fire and static lightning, the kind of sky that made even hardened soldiers whisper prayers. But for Captain Dana Rains, the 32-year-old A-10 pilot they called Valkyrie, it was just another battlefield painted in fear and flame. Her call sign wasn't a nickname, it was a promise. When she rolled her A-10 Thunderbolt II, serial 78921, out from the hangar that night, the SEALs on the ground had already called it. The mission was suicide. 2 helicopters down, a team of 12 pinned inside a ravine by an ambush of insurgents who had Russian-made man-pads and anti-aircraft guns. No satellite coverage, no support, no hope. The SEALs had one radio transmission left. "We're surrounded. If we don't get air support in 5 minutes, we're gone." Command refused the call. They'd lost contact with drone feeds and AWACS radar, everything. But Dana, standing in the cockpit glow of her A-10, heard that voice come through the static. "Anyone out there? We're dying down here." And something in her broke. She strapped in, flipped the master switch, and said into her comms, "This is Valkyrie. Tell them I'm coming." Her crew chief, Sergeant Hollis, sprinted toward the jet, shouting that the left engine was leaking hydraulic fluid, that the nose gear actuator was damaged from the last run, that command hadn't cleared her to fly, but Dana's eyes didn't blink. "They're SEALs," she said, "and I don't leave anyone behind." As the A-10's twin turbofans roared, the sound was like thunder rolling through steel. Hollis slapped the fuselage once, a superstitious salute, and watched her taxi out into the black desert, dust swallowing the shape of the jet like smoke consuming a ghost. The control tower called her 3 times, ordering her back, but Dana cut comms and climbed through a dust storm so thick it erased the horizon. The only light came from distant explosions. Her radar was blind, her targeting system unreliable. But her instincts, razor-sharp from years of low-altitude attack runs, guided her toward the valley where 12 SEALs fought for their lives. Below, tracer rounds painted the canyon like fiery veins, red and green streaks chasing ghosts through the darkness. "Valkyrie, we've got your beacon," came the broken voice of Lieutenant Jackson, the SEAL team leader, panting, coughing, whispering, "We're pinned behind wreckage. 3 wounded, 2 critical. They're flanking us from the West Ridge. We've got 5 minutes, maybe less." Dana checked her coordinates. She was 30 miles out, flying nap of the earth at 200 feet, radar off. "Hang tight," she said, voice calm, heart racing. "I see your smoke." But she didn't. Not yet. The radio crackled again. "They've got man pads." And that was when she saw it. A plume of fire rising from the canyon floor, a missile slicing the night sky. She dropped flares, banked hard, felt the heat as the missile missed her by 50 feet, exploding behind her tail and rocking the jet so violently her helmet slammed the canopy. The A-10 wasn't built for elegance. It was built for survival. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon beneath her growled like thunder when she armed it, and she lined up her first pass through sheer instinct. The SEALs were using the burning wreck of a helo as cover, and insurgents were advancing from all sides. She squeezed the trigger, and the A-10's cannon roared, a stream of 30mm shells tearing through the dark. Trees, rock, and men vanished under the avalanche of tungsten fire. The SEALs looked up and saw heaven open. Dana's voice came through their headsets, calm, clipped, precise. "Valkyrie engaging. Keep your heads down." But the enemy wasn't done. 3 more launch plumes rose from the hills. She dropped chaff, flares, jinked left, rolled, dove. Missiles streaked past, one grazing her right wing, shredding the metal into a ragged wound. Lights flashed on her control panel, alarms screamed, hydraulic fluid pressure dropped to 0. "You're hit," Jackson yelled. Dana steadied her breath, eyes scanning the horizon. "Still flying," she said. "Still fighting." The SEALs could hear her cannon again sweeping the ridge. One by one, the insurgent positions went silent. But in the chaos, one missile found its mark. It hit her left wing, close to the root, with a fireball so bright the SEALs thought the sky itself cracked. "She's gone," one whispered. But Dana wasn't gone. Her A-10 rolled, spiraling toward the canyon floor, alarms blaring, her flight computer dead, hoody flickering static. She fought the stick with raw muscle, counterbalancing the roll, slamming emergency bypass systems. The aircraft bled altitude fast, too fast. She saw the canyon floor rise toward her, pulled the throttle, and prayed. The A-10 leveled 30 feet above ground, skimming over rocks and flames, one wing half gone, the other bleeding fuel. "Still with you?" she gasped, voice trembling. The SEALs couldn't believe it. No one could. The A-10 banked again, slower this time, limping through the sky like a wounded predator refusing to die. She made 2 more passes, strafing the enemy with her last ammo until her cannon clicked empty and the valley went silent, except for crackling fires and distant thunder. "All clear," she said, breathing hard. "Get your wounded ready. I'm staying overhead." "Valkyrie," Jackson said, "you're hit bad. You need to get out of there." "Negative," she replied, staring at the instruments, half of them dead. "I'll cover you till you're out." For 20 minutes, she circled that canyon, one engine sputtering, smoke trailing like a comet tail. When the SEALs finally reached their extraction point, Dana turned her A-10 toward base. Her fuel light blinked red. She'd lost hydraulics, nav control, and half her left wing. The manual said impossible. The SEALs said impossible. But Dana gritted her teeth and whispered, "Not today." She climbed through the black sky, guiding her wounded bird with a surgeon's touch. The base radioed her at last, voices frantic. "Valkyrie, we see your damage. You're not going to make it. Eject!" But she refused. "This aircraft isn't done yet," she said, gripping the stick, forcing the A-10 to level. At 20 miles out, she hit a dust storm that swallowed everything. No horizon, no lights, just instruments failing one by one. Her oxygen mask hissed. Sweat rolled down her neck. For the first time, she thought of her father, the man who'd taught her to fly over cornfields in Iowa, his voice echoing, "Always trust your hands, kid. Machines fail." "You don't," she smiled through the fear. "Copy that, Dad." Then lightning cracked the sky, revealing the base faintly through the storm. She was almost there. But the left wing began to shear, metal screaming, bolts popping. Alarms filled the cockpit. The A-10 was dying under her. "Valkyrie, eject!" They yelled again. She ignored it, pushed throttle to max, and prayed the landing gear would hold. The base crew scrambled to clear the runway, lights flashing through the storm, medics waiting. When she broke through the cloud layer, what they saw defied belief. An A-10 flying crooked, one wing torn nearly off, the fuselage scorched, but still airborne. "How is that thing still in the air?" one officer whispered. The answer came when she touched down, too fast, too hard. The left gear collapsed, the aircraft veered, metal screeching as sparks flew, but Dana held the stick steady, skidding across the runway until the jet finally stopped, smoking, silent. The canopy cracked open and she climbed out limping, helmet under one arm. The SEALs she'd saved were waiting, bloody and stunned, their faces lit by floodlights. Lieutenant Jackson stepped forward, saluted, and said the words that would follow her forever. Even the SEALs called it impossible. "But you did it!" Dana smiled faintly, dirt-streaked, eyes burning. Guess someone had to prove them wrong. And in that moment, under the rain and the roar of distant thunder, she became legend, a woman who flew home on half a wing. When dawn rose over Kandahar, the base smelled of jet fuel, dust, and disbelief. Dana Raines sat on the hood of a Humvee, bandaged arm resting on her knee, watching mechanics swarm the wrecked A-10 like ants around a fallen god. The left wing hung by a single spar, the fuselage shredded, one engine melted to slag, and yet somehow it had brought her home. Reporters wanted interviews, generals wanted explanations, but Dana just wanted silence. The SEALs she'd saved came to see her before being airlifted out, each one shaking her hand with that silent gratitude soldiers share when words fall short. "You broke physics," Jackson said, smirking through cracked lips. She smiled weakly. "Guess no one told me the rules." But behind the humor, there was something darker. Command had opened an inquiry, questioning why she'd launched without clearance, why she'd risked a $19 million jet on an unauthorized rescue. Her commanding officer, Colonel Briggs, a man who'd spent more time behind desks than cockpits, summoned her to the hangar. You disobeyed orders, he said coldly. You're grounded. Dana stood there, dirt still on her boots, listening to a man who'd never seen tracer fire tell her she'd endangered protocol. Sir, she said quietly, I did my job. Your job, he snapped, is to follow command structure, not play hero. The words stung more than shrapnel. That night she walked the runway alone, the same path she'd landed on half dead, the moon reflecting off the twisted remains of her jet. The mechanics had chalked a message on the fuselage. Valkyrie never dies. She traced the letters with her fingers and whispered, Not yet. But news had spread. Videos of her landing leaked. The story of the impossible flight blazing through military channels and into the public. Overnight, she became a symbol. The pilot who refused to eject, the warrior who flew home on faith. Command tried to bury it, but the legend had already taken flight. Still, Dana knew the truth. The mission wasn't over. The insurgent network that ambushed the SEALs had captured 2 Americans still unaccounted for. Intel officers left behind in the chaos. And though her bird was grounded, her spirit wasn't. Somewhere in those mountains, the fight still burned, and Valkyrie was already hearing the call again. 3 days later, Dana found herself in a tent outside Bagram, the heat pressing down like a punishment, the sound of generators humming through canvas walls. She was supposed to be on medical leave, but instead she was staring at satellite photos spread across a table, grainy images of a compound buried in the mountains, guarded, fortified, impossible to reach by ground. The missing intel officers were alive, but not for long. She'd overheard the briefing, heard the SEAL commander say the same thing he'd said before. No air support can get in. Too many SAMs. It's suicide. Dana felt a familiar fire spark inside her. That night, she slipped into the hangar where her wrecked A-10 sat like a wounded animal. The mechanics had stripped parts, declared it unflyable, but she touched the cracked metal like it was a living thing. You and me again, she whispered. When dawn came, the guards found her already suited up, cockpit half reassembled, hands covered in grease. Colonel Briggs stormed in, shouting, but by the time he reached the tarmac, the A-10's engines were already roaring to life. She'd rebuilt the impossible. The jet lifted off, limping but alive, its missing wing replaced by salvaged steel plates and a patchwork of courage. Command screamed through the radio, but Dana flew straight into the storm again. The insurgents below never saw her coming. She tore through the valley like a ghost returned from hell, blowing open the compound walls, clearing a path for the rescue team. The SEALs on the ground couldn't believe it. It was her again. The woman who defied orders, defied death, defied gravity itself. When the hostages were lifted out and the smoke cleared, her jet was barely holding together. But she smiled through cracked lips and said, Told you. Valkyrie never dies. By the time Dana touched down, the sky behind her burned orange with dawn and victory, and the radio crackled with disbelief from every frequency in range. The battered A-10 rolled to a stop, coughing smoke, landing gear trembling as if the jet itself were exhausted from surviving fate twice. When the canopy opened, Dana didn't climb out immediately. She just sat there, staring at the horizon, listening to the hiss of cooling metal and her own heartbeat pounding like afterburners in her chest. The rescue had worked. The intel officers were safe, and once again, the impossible had bent to her will. Command couldn't court-martial a miracle. The footage had already spread to every corner of the internet. News anchors called her the Iron Angel, veterans called her a legend, and even the same SEALs who'd once called it suicide stood at attention when she walked by. But none of it mattered to Dana. What mattered was that every pilot watching knew now what she had proved twice, that courage could rewrite physics, that heart could outfly fear. That night, as the base quieted under stars, she visited the A-10 one last time, resting a hand on the scarred fuselage. We did it, she whispered. We came home. And when she turned to leave, the lights from the hangar glinted off the words someone had painted there again in fresh white letters. Valkyrie never dies. She smiled, finally letting herself breathe, unaware that her story was already inspiring new pilots across the world to take the skies with fire in their veins. Because heroes like her don't just fly. They remind the rest of us that even when the world says it's impossible, you rise anyway. And if that story lit a spark in you, hit subscribe. Because legends like Valkyrie don't fade, they fly on forever.